The text message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was debugging code at work. Three simple sentences that made my world tilt on its axis. I need space, Marcus. Please don't contact me for a while. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I stared at my phone screen until the words blurred. Sarah and I had been together for 3 years. We'd weathered job losses, family dramas, and a pandemic. We'd talked about marriage, picked out potential dog names, and spent lazy Sunday mornings planning our future. And now this. My first instinct was to call her immediately. My thumb hovered over her contact photo, the one from our trip to Portland last summer where she was laughing at something I'd said, her dark hair whipping in the coastal wind. But something in the finality of her message stopped me. She'd asked for space. The least I could do was respect that. The first week was agony. I'd reach for my phone 100 times a day, muscle memory, wanting to share a funny meme, ask about her day, or send a simple goodnight text. Our apartment felt too quiet without her weekend visits. Her toothbrush still stood in my bathroom holder like a tiny monument to better times. I couldn't bring myself to move it. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office until the janitor started giving me concerned looks. My code output tripled, but my manager Janet pulled me aside on Friday. Marcus, you've been here until midnight every day this week. Everything okay? I forced a smile. Just really engaged with the new project. She didn't look convinced but let it slide. That weekend, I deep cleaned my apartment, reorganized my bookshelf alphabetically, and even started that Python course I'd been putting off for months. Anything to keep my mind occupied. By the second week, the acute pain had dulled to a persistent ache. I started analyzing our relationship like a bug in my code, trying to identify where things had gone wrong. Had I been too clingy? Not attentive enough? I thought about our last few weeks together, searching for signs I'd missed. She had seemed more distant lately, spending more time at her studio apartment instead of mine. Our conversations had felt stilted, like we were reading from scripts. When was the last time we'd really laughed together? The realization that I couldn't remember hit me like a punch to the gut. My best friend Dev tried to help, dragging me out for drinks on Wednesday night. Maybe she just needs time to figure things out, he said, nursing his beer. It doesn't necessarily mean it's over. She asked me not to contact her, I replied, peeling the label off my bottle. That sounds pretty final to me. Or it sounds like someone who's overwhelmed and needs to process. You've been together 3 years, man. That's not nothing. I wanted to believe him, but hope felt dangerous. It was easier to prepare for the worst than to get blindsided by it later. The third week brought unexpected clarity. Without the constant texture of our relationship, the good morning texts, the plans for dinner, the casual intimacy of shared daily life, I had time to really think. Not just about us, but about myself. When was the last time I'd pursued a hobby that wasn't related to Sarah? When had I last hung out with friends without her? I realized I'd been defining myself entirely through our relationship. Marcus and Sarah had become my whole identity, and somewhere along the way, just Marcus had gotten lost. I signed up for a rock climbing class I'd been interested in before we met. I reached out to old college friends I'd neglected. I started journaling, something my therapist had suggested years ago, but I'd never followed through on. The pages filled with insights that surprised me. I think I've been afraid of being alone, I wrote one night. Not because I don't like myself, but because I've forgotten how to be by myself. Sarah became my entire world, and that's not fair to either of us. By week 4, I'd established a new routine. Morning runs before work, climbing on Tuesdays and Thursdays, game night with friends on Wednesdays. I still missed Sarah desperately, but the missing had changed shape. Instead of a desperate need to get back what we had, I found myself wondering what we could build if we both came back to the relationship as whole people instead of two halves trying to make a whole. I was coming back from a particularly challenging climb on a Thursday evening when I saw her. Sarah was sitting on the steps outside my apartment building, her jacket pulled tight against the October chill. My heart did a complicated gymnastics routine in my chest. "Hi," she said, standing as I approached. She looked different somehow. Her hair was shorter and there was something in her posture, a stillness I hadn't seen before. "Hi." I managed my keys jingling nervously in my hand. "Do you want to come up?" She nodded and we climbed the 3 flights in silence. Inside my apartment, she looked around with curious eyes, taking in the changes. The new climbing gear in the corner, the journal on the coffee table, the thriving plants I'd actually managed to keep alive. "The place looks good," she said. "You look good too. Healthier." "Thanks. You look—" I paused, trying to find the right word. "Centered." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "That's actually a perfect word for it. Can we talk?" We settled on opposite ends of the couch, the space between us feeling both vast and insignificant. Sarah tucked her legs under her, a gesture so familiar it made my chest tight. "I'm sorry for how I handled things," she began. "Sending that text out of nowhere wasn't fair to you. I just— I was drowning, Marcus, and I didn't know how else to come up for air." "Drowning?" I echoed, genuinely surprised. "In what?" She took a deep breath. "In us. In the life we'd built. I woke up one morning and realized I didn't know who I was outside of being your girlfriend. Every decision I made was filtered through how it would affect us. Where to live, what job to take, how to spend my weekends. And the scariest part was that I couldn't remember when I'd stopped being my own person." Her words resonated so deeply, I almost laughed. "I've been thinking the same thing. About myself, I mean." Her eyes widened. "Really?" I told her about my month, the climbing, the journaling, the painful realization that I'd been using our relationship as a shield against having to figure out who I really was. She listened intently, occasionally, nodding in recognition. "I went to therapy," she said when I finished. "Something I'd been putting off because we were always so busy with couple stuff. And I started painting again. Really painting, not just doodling. I'd forgotten how much I loved it." "That's amazing, Sarah. I'm really happy for you. I also realized something else." She continued, her voice softer now. "I love you, Marcus. That was never the problem. The problem was that I'd confused love with codependence. I thought being in a relationship meant becoming one person, but that's not healthy. It's not sustainable." The word love in present tense made my heart race. "So, where does that leave us?" She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her choosing her words carefully. "I'd like to try again, but differently this time. I want us to be two whole people who choose to share their lives, not two half people trying to complete each other. Does that make sense?" "It makes perfect sense," I said, feeling a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying start to lift. "But how do we do that? How do we not fall back into old patterns?" "Slowly," she said. "We date again. We maintain our separate spaces, our separate friends and hobbies. We schedule time together instead of assuming we'll always be together. We check in with ourselves and each other regularly. We go to couples therapy not because we're broken, but because we want to build something healthy." I thought about the past month, about the person I'd started to become when I wasn't trying to be half of something else. "I like who I am when I'm on my own," I admitted. "I don't want to lose that." "I don't want you to lose that either," Sarah said. "I like who you are too, and I like who I am now. I think, I think we could be really good together as these versions of ourselves." We talked for hours that night, setting boundaries and expectations. We decided to start with one date a week, maintaining our separate living spaces indefinitely. We continue our individual therapy and start couples counseling. We'd check in monthly about how things were going, adjusting as needed. It wasn't the reunion I'd imagined during those first desperate days. It was something better, more honest, more intentional, more likely to last. As Sarah prepared to leave that night, she paused at my door. "Thank you for giving me the space I asked for. I know it wasn't easy." "It was horrible," I admitted with a laugh, "but also exactly what I needed even if I didn't know it at the time." She kissed me, then soft and brief, full of promise rather than desperation. After she left, I sat in my apartment, not ours, and felt genuinely excited about the future for the first time in longer than I cared to admit. 6 months later, we were stronger than we'd ever been. We'd had our first fight in the new paradigm, about scheduling conflicts, ironically, and navigated it with the tools we'd learned in therapy. We'd taken a vacation together and one separately. We'd learned to miss each other in a healthy way, to appreciate our time together without clinging to it. The unexpected ending. It wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. The real plot twist came a year after that night on my couch. We were at our favorite restaurant celebrating the fact that Sarah had just landed her first gallery show. The waiter had just brought dessert when Sarah pulled out a small box. "I have something for you," she said, sliding it across the table. Inside were 2 keys. I looked up at her, confused. "They're to a house," she explained, her eyes bright with excitement and a hint of nerves. "A duplex, actually. 2 separate units connected by a shared wall. I put an offer in and it was accepted yesterday." I stared at the keys, understanding dawning. "You bought us separate houses that are together." "I bought us the option," she corrected, "to be together while still being ourselves. To have our own spaces when we need them, but only be a door away when we don't. It might be crazy, but it's perfect," I interrupted, reaching for her hand. "It's absolutely perfect." She laughed, relief and joy mingling in the sound. "Really? You don't think it's too weird?" "Sarah, we spent a year learning how to be healthy individuals in a relationship. This is just the physical manifestation of that. Besides," I grinned, "when have we ever done things the conventional way?" We moved in 3 months later. My side was all clean lines and tech with my climbing wall in the spare bedroom. Her side was an explosion of color and creativity, with a studio that caught the morning light perfectly. The connecting door stayed open most of the time, but knowing we could close it if needed made all the difference. Our friends thought we were crazy, our families were confused, but our therapist said it was one of the healthiest arrangements she'd seen. We had dinner together most nights, sometimes at his place, sometimes at mine. We had separate home offices for when we worked from home. We hosted parties that flowed between both spaces. We learned to knock before entering, to ask before assuming, to choose each other daily, rather than taking each other for granted. The day I proposed, I did it in the doorway between our 2 homes. "This threshold," I said on one knee, "represents everything I love about us. 2 whole people choosing to share their lives while respecting each other's autonomy. Will you marry me, but also continue to be gloriously independently you?" She said yes, laughing and crying at the same time. We got married in our backyard, the one space that was truly ours together. In our vows, we promised to always give each other space to grow, even when it was scary, especially when it was scary. Looking back now, 5 years after that text message that changed everything, I realized the unexpected ending was this: sometimes love means holding on tight, and sometimes it means letting go. But the strongest love, the kind that lasts, knows how to do both. Sarah was right to ask for space. It wasn't the end of our story. It was the chapter where we learned to write a better one. We learned that needing space doesn't mean loving someone less. Sometimes it means loving them enough to become the person they deserve. And in the duplex we now call home, with her paintings decorating my walls and my climbing photos hanging in her kitchen, with the door between us open more often than not, but closable when needed, we've found the perfect balance between together and apart. The space she asked for didn't drive us apart. It gave us room to grow separately and together. And that, it turns out, made all the difference. Sometimes I think about that version of me who got the text 5 years ago, panicking at his desk, convinced it was the end of everything. I wish I could tell him, she's not leaving you. She's finding herself so she can choose you properly. And you're about to do the same. The unexpected ending wasn't an ending at all. It was space, literal and figurative, for two people to become their best selves. And in that space, we found a love stronger than anything we could have imagined when we were desperately clinging to each other, afraid to let go. Now, when young couples ask us for relationship advice, we tell them this: don't be afraid of space. Don't confuse constant togetherness with intimacy. Learn to miss each other. Cultivate your own interests. Be whole people who choose to share their wholeness, not half people trying to complete each other. And if someone you love asks for space, give it to them. Use it yourself. You might be surprised by who you both become when you stop being afraid of being alone. You might find, as we did, that the space between you isn't empty at all. It's full of possibility, growth, and a love that chose to stretch rather than snap. That Tuesday afternoon 5 years ago, when my world tilted on its axis, I thought I was losing everything. Instead, I was being given the opportunity to find myself, and in doing so, to find a love that was actually worth keeping. The unexpected ending. We're still writing it one day at a time in our perfectly imperfect duplex, with just enough space between us to remember why we choose to be together.